Hey, everybody, welcome back to another fantastic edition of the His and Her Money Show, where we make it our business to help you take dominion over your money and your life. Thank you for tuning in to another fantastic episode. We do this work for you because we want you to have authority over everything that God wants you to have authority over. And we're going to do that again with today's episode. We talk about money sometimes, we talk about business sometimes, we talk about relationships sometimes, but underneath all of it is your relationship with God. And sometimes that relationship can get a little tricky for us. Sometimes we have prayers that we have before God and He answers them, but maybe not so much in the way that we desire for them to be answered. And things can get a little out of sorts for us. We're wondering, where is He? What's going on? What is He doing? Why is He doing this? So we have a special guest that's going to help us kind of navigate these types of moments in our life where we feel maybe God is not being obedient to us in the way that we thought that He would. Our special guest today is none other than Pastor Albert Tate. He is the pastor of Fellowship Church in California. He's also the author of a brand new, fantastic book called Disobedient God. And he's going to talk some jewels, some nuggets of wisdom that we'll be able to use, not just here and now, but for seasons to come. So get your pen and paper ready, or get the Notes app open on your iPad or iPhone, because I don't know what Android has, but I know if you got an iPhone or an iPad, you're going to be all right. And get ready to write down and apply what you're about to learn today. So let's go get Pastor Albert ready so we can hear his great knowledge on the matter. Hey, Pastor Albert, welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Yo, His and Her Money. Come on. I'm so glad to be here.
We're thrilled to have you here. Been admiring you and your work from a distance for quite a while. So to have you here is totally amazing. We know not only us, but our audience is going to be blessed by what you have to share today. But some people are being introduced to you for the first time right here and right now. So for them, would you mind saying hello and then kind of let them know a little bit about what you are all about?
Yo, well, I'm so honored to be here on the His and Her Money Show. I love that title. I'm a Mississippi boy that moved to California probably about 17 years ago. And about 12 years ago, we planted Fellowship Church here right outside of Pasadena, California, in Monrovia. And it's a gospel centered, multi ethnic, intergenerational church. And we exist to make disciples and to make kingdom impact. So we've been doing that. And during that time, I kind of written a couple of books. One, How We Love Matters, that talks about racial reconciliation and our pursuit of that so that we can reflect the kingdom of God, every nation, every tribe, every tongue, and every race. And then this latest book is called Disobedient God. And it just came out. And it's been fun talking about something that we probably don't talk about enough, and that's difficult seasons and rough seasons in our relationship with God, and doubt and unbelief and all that encouraging stuff.
So this is, as you just said, not a topic flowery, not a topic that's consistently communicated, but you decided to go in this direction. Why?
Man, we know what to do with God when He does exactly what we wanted Him to do. Like, we needed a check at 2 o'clock on Sunday. Man, the check came 3 on Saturday. Like God just made a way. We needed the tumor to shrink. Went to the doctor's office, the tumor was gone. Hallelujah. What do you do when you go to the doctor's office and the tumor's spread? What do you do when you needed the money on Sunday by 2 and it's Monday and now the lights are off because you didn't get the money to pay the bill? We know what to do with God when He's on time and when He makes a way. But what do we do when He doesn't answer our to-do list? I mean, our prayer list. What do we do when He refuses to surrender His will to ours? What do you do with a God who goes off script? What do you do with a disobedient God, a God who refuses to obey you and refuses to surrender His will? And and I just take some time and talk about, in those dark seasons, in those rough times, in those disappointing moments, our reaction and our response is a really big deal. So how do we respond? What do we do when God does? We always talk about what God does. What do we do when he does what he does? And what he does is disappointing. What he does is discouraging. What he does is something that we would never allow. We would never sign off on. We would never agree to. We'd never sign up and say, "Ooh, sign me up for this." We would never do it. But God in his sovereignty has allowed it. And we just talk about how do we respond in those rough and disappointing moments.
It seems like if people see you preaching or see you talking or maybe on social media, one thing about you is you're always smiling, Pastor Alberts. So have you ever been here? Have you ever found yourself disappointed in what God chose to do? How did you bounce back?
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't even think, I'm not sure if I would use the word bounce back. I think you bounce a lot, but you don't bounce back. You usually bounce to a new iteration of yourself. You come out different. I mean, we can go. I got so many stories where I've been disappointed by God. He's been disobedient a long time in my life. He got a habit of not doing what I tell him to do. But whether it was when I flunked out of high school and I had to get my GED and nobody around me knew, none of my friends, my family knew that I wouldn't be a senior the next year, and I had to tell that and deal with the shame and the guilt of that. I think fundamentally, you ask yourself, what do we do? We probably do way more than we realize. If you're the children of Israel, in Exodus 32, you replace him. You look to the mountain, and Moses and God are up there, and they just taking too long. So they literally talk to Aaron and they say, Aaron, give us another God. We want another one, because the one we got, we don't know what's happened to them. So build us a God. And Aaron says, yes, watch this. So he said, grab your gold. So they reach for gold, but they're longing for God. So the question is, what are you longing for and what are you reaching for? And do you know the difference? You're longing for God, but because he's taken too long, they ended up reaching for gold. A lot of us, what I realized, there have been seasons in my life where I was longing for intimacy, but I reached for pornography. Longing for comfort, but reaching for Hennessy. Um, Longing for security, but reaching for more money. And what we don't realize is that the security that you long for can only come from God. The comfort that you long for can only be provided for God. And the intimacy that you desire can only be met and satisfied in God and God alone. So, what happens, like most of us, when God is disappointing, when God is going off script, we end up reaching for other things to replace Him, a cheap counterfeit, instead of sitting in the waiting for the great original. We start reaching for. I'm longing for comfort, but I'm reaching for food, bro. I can't tell you the amount of times where I'm discouraged, I'm a little depressed, and I just go get food. I just go eat. I go get a number one in McDonald's and I hug that Big Mac. The problem is the Big Mac never hugs you back. The bucket of ice cream never hugs you back. So it doesn't even matter what it is, but we all tend to begin to reach for things to supplement the dissonance and the distance that we feel with God. And what we talk about in the book is, number one, what do you reach for? What do you reach for when you're longing for God, but he's distant? What are you reaching for?
Absolutely. And I think that the way that you give it to us, it makes it a super introspective process because sometimes that stuff is normal. It even has cute titles like comfort eating, right? It sounds, hey, that's typical, ice cream or a Big Mac in your case. It used, I think, and when I listened to your sermon, it used to be Wendy's, but then you went to
Wendy's. I
you went
moved to.
to
I went to the Big Mac. I had seasons. I've had seasons. I've had seasons. Wendy's still my girl though. I still try to avoid her. That red hair get me every time. Bro. I come by there. She on
but
there looking at me. Yeah.
we do we it's like we do have a time limit on God. We have this expectation because he is God, he can do all things, he's all powerful, that it should be instant. Like, I just prayed, I just believe by faith. Okay, it should come like right now. And when it doesn't, now we have to go into our own survival mode in our mind. We have to come up with a solution in our mind. We have to make a way out of no way in our mind, even if we don't want to necessarily admit that. So if that's become our default, because a lot of us in the natural sense, a lot of us have lived lives to where we had to be the solutionist. And we had to, because we weren't given this opportunity or that opportunity. So we had to make our own way. And that becomes leaked over into our spiritual journey. How do we recognize, maybe, as you said, that we're longing for God, but we've been reaching for gold? How do we assess if we've been grabbing for gold lately?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, gold, the reach is for anything outside of God. So Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is." That means He is all I need, and because of who He is, the next line says, "I shall not want." So it's basically saying, um, and David put it this way. He says, "One thing have I desired, and that will I seek after." I like to say that's what I'll reach after. So your reach has got to be God. And if you reaching for anything else other than God, you're reaching for the wrong thing. In other words, David will tell you, if God ain't providing it, then I ain't wanting it. Now, you can have many, many requests and still have one desire. In other words, I refuse to allow any request that I have to be greater than my desire for God. So, God, if this is not your desire for me, please, nevertheless, this request. Nevertheless, this request. I never want anything less than your will for my life. So if my request is less than your best, then I surrender my request and I trust you and I reach and I grab for you. So pay attention to what you're reaching for. Pay attention to your wants. Pay attention to your request and keep surrendering them to God and say, God, if this isn't of you, if this isn't you, I don't want it. And basically anything that's sin, anything that's outside of the will of God is that also defines the reach. They reach for gold because they were familiar with many gods from Egypt in Exodus 32. So they went in a time of dissonance and disappointment with God. They reach for what was familiar instead of waiting on the one who had been faithful.
How have you learned to wait? How have you learned to be patient when you have things before God, even if it's not, even so, like some things are cut and dry with, sin or holiness. But what about those good things, right? That aren't God things, that the good things that are outside of God's will, these good requests that you have, but like you've thought about it and you like, man, this will be super beneficial for me, or this will be super beneficial for me to have an impact for the kingdom. It's good, but it's not God. And there's this period where you're waiting for the answer, or maybe you've gotten the answer and you're like, no, wait, maybe let me wait a little bit longer. I don't think that's, maybe God misunderstood what I was saying. That interim period, that period where you see Moses up in Mount Sinai talking to God, and you're waiting for him to come back with an answer. How do you develop patience in those moments?
Yeah, yeah. Well, a couple of things. Good things can become bad things when they become ultimate things. So even good things can still become idols because you've made them more important than God. So you want to check your heart posture. And sometimes you desire the thing from God more than you desire God Himself. And you got to check your heart, and God can sniff out um things that threaten y'all's relationship because he's jealous. He can be petty. So he's peeping the longing of your heart and how you're really longing for the thing that you hope he provides for you more than you are longing for the one who actually is your provider. So checking your heart is real huge. And, you know, bro, this waiting thing, number one, I heard an old pastor say, never pray for patience, because the way God makes you patient are things that'll just frustrate the living daylights out of you. Pray for patience and you in traffic for 4 hours. God said, you pray for patience. So he's not, I'm kidding. God's petty, but he's not petty, but he is a little bit sometimes. It feels like he is. Um, how to wait on God? You just gotta wait. You just gotta wait. It's and you keep your eyes on him. Keep your eyes on him and keep vision before you. Know that weeping may endure for a night, but joy is going to come in the morning. Know that on the other side of this, it will be his glory, but know that his presence is available in the waiting. Like you're not waiting by yourself. It's not like he's behind the curtain and you waiting on him to come out. No, if you invite him, he sits in the waiting. He sits with you right there in the waiting. So don't underestimate that, and don't miss the opportunity to sit with God without the distraction of his blessing. Ooh, that was good. That blessed my own soul. In other words, you're waiting on the gift from him. But this is an opportunity for you to see that he, in fact, is the gift. You're waiting on the miracle, the healing, the financial breakthrough, whatever those things. And it's not to minimize your problem at all. It's really an effort to help you maximize the view of your God. What if he's bigger than the thing you're waiting on him for? And what if you acknowledge that in the waiting and you become so consumed with his presence in the waiting, you forget what you're waiting on? Usually, that's when the breakthrough comes.
That was so good. Another way that I mean, everything that you put in this book is challenging. The name of this book is challenging. Like even to say those two words together, disobedient God, is a challenge. And you talk about how when this disobedient God shows up, that it's important for us to acknowledge the pain. It's important for us to acknowledge the disappointment and not suppress those feelings that we're feeling. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
You know, God is not some softy that he can't handle conflict. He's not conflict averse. He's not so he's not intimidated by your doubts. He's just not intimidated by your questions. He's not like, oh Lord, she asking questions. Gabriel, come here. What is we gonna do? Like nobody, he ain't scared. He ain't scared. He's not intimidated. He's not threatened. So bring it. The best way to wrestle with God is with God. Like wrestle with him. Like we all need to doubt like Thomas doubted. Thomas, that boy doubted right. Let me tell you something. Thomas doubted right. He get a bad rap and we talk about him having doubts. The truth is, I think they all had doubts. He was the one of the ones that had the courage to say it out loud. Here's the gift. Say it out loud. Confess to him. Acknowledge I'm struggling with you, God. I'm struggling with what you allowed in my life. I'm struggling with the situation that I'm in. I'm struggling with your silence. I'm struggling with this felt distance. I'm struggling. Tell the truth about where you are. Thomas told the truth about where he had doubts and he said it out loud. The other thing that he did is he doubted with the disciples. So many people doubt, bro, and they just leave the church. They leave the Christian. They leave the community. You know, doubt in community. Doubt with the disciples. Doubt with your brothers and sisters at the church. Bring your doubts to church. And in his doubts, he wasn't looking for a way out of his faith. He was looking for a way back into his faith. In his doubts, what did he say? He said, Jesus is gonna have to show me. Jesus is gonna have to show me the hole in the nail print in his hands. He's gonna have to show me the nail print. In his doubts, he was looking for Jesus. When we doubt, look for Jesus. Look for him. Invite Jesus. Invite Jesus to show you. In my spiritual imagination, I imagine that the angels came and was ministering to Jesus's body and restoring his body and putting him back. Because when he was, I mean, the crucified body was like gory, you know what I mean? And when he was walking around, people weren't like, ah. So the assumption is, the implication, the insinuation is that his glorified body was kind of put back together, right? So he's got his body put back together. And I'd imagine the angels got to his hand with the hole. And Jesus was like, no, 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 don't fix the hole. Don't fix the hole. And it's like, Jesus, why you gonna leave a hole in your hand? And Jesus is like, Thomas, y'all know Thomas is gonna need to see this hole. Y'all know how he wired, he got them down. Y'all know Thomas. So Jesus shows up and said, "Come here, Thomas. Here you go. Put your hand right here." In other words, I knew you had doubts, and I made a way for your doubts. God is so good, and He knows us so well. Even when we have doubts about Him, He's saying, "Yeah, there's a grace for that. The hole in my hand is a grace for your doubts, even towards me. And I already provided a grace." So if you got doubts, God's already provided a grace for you. He's got a hole in his hand to show you. He's not threatened. He's not offended by your doubts. He's saying, "Come on, Tom. Come on. Come bring them, bring your doubt. You and your doubts come and let me show you who I am."
Sometimes when you're in the storm, right? When you talked about Thomas and the rest of them, they gave their lives to this cause. They surrendered all to follow Jesus, and they watched him die on the cross. And I, I'm with you. I think they all were like, "What? Huh? This is not how this was supposed to go. God has gone off script." When you're there, before Jesus shows back up and gives you any evidence, you're just there in the in between. It's difficult. A lot of people that follow us know that around this time last year, my wife and I, we planted a church. We became church planners. And then 4 weeks after we opened the doors of the church, my wife loses her mom. And she actually went into the hospital 2 days before our launch service. So she never got to see the church. And one of the questions my wife just struggles with, like, why would you call me to this and not let her see it? It'd be little questions like that, right? She's not challenged in her faith. She needed time off. That's why she's not here. But she knows God. She knows he's faithful, and she knows he's perfect in all of his ways. But sometimes it be them little questions like, this part I don't get, and this part I'm struggling with. You don't have the evidence yet. You're just sitting there with that question. Like, why? Thomas was like, why did he say, forsake everyone and follow? Who is my mother? Who's my father? These are my brother. This is my mother and this is my father. And now he's not here. When you're there feeling it, when you're there questioning it, it's hard, Pastor Albert. You know that. When it gets real hard like that, and you're grasping for hope, but your grip is loosening. How do you tighten it back up in that moment?
Yeah. Well, I think understanding the heart of God. Um, there's a meme of an old couple who are fighting. They've had a fight and they're mad at each other, and they're sitting on a bus stop bench, and it's raining. So the old man is on one side of the bench, and his wife is on the other side, but he's holding up an umbrella over her head. In other words, even when we mad at each other, I'm still willing to cover you. Um, Mary and Martha would tell you they were ticked at Jesus. They had a great relationship. Jesus let Lazarus die. As a matter of fact, when Jesus got there, she let him have it. If you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Jesus says, "Show me where you laid him." And he goes over. Now, listen to this. We know what's about that. We know he's about to raise him from the dead. We actually know that there's victory on the other side of this. He's about to fix the problem. He doesn't rush in, and the first thing isn't roll the stone away. The first sound is him weeping and crying because he wanted them to know y'all in a lot of pain right now, and that you have a God who's willing to sit in your pain with you. Even though I hold the answer, I'm still willing to sit in empathy in the problem. Like, God is that good and that kind and that gracious. You don't have to wait on the resolve or to feel better. You can be pissed, you can be angry, you can be disappointed. And he's saying, just let me come. Can I come to the disappointment session? Can I can I can I just come and sit with you? Because even though you're mad at me, I still want to cover you. I still want to, I'm still there. So I think the first thing is permission to grieve, permission to sit in that, and a request, an invitation not to sit alone, to invite community and God in that. And it may be a while before you can see the clarity of his sovereignty. And the old saints used to say this back in Mississippi. They say, um, you'll understand it better by and by. In other words, there's some stuff that ain't gonna make sense on this side. And if your pursuit of God is based off of your ability to make sense of God, then you're in a futile pursuit. So the answer and the goal is not to try to understand and make sense of him. The the goal is to trust him when you can't trace him, and to rest in him and know that he has enough receipts and he's offered up enough sacrifice, and we've seen his resume, and he's got a great credit score. We can trust him based off of who he's always been, even in hard times. So that's what I would say. I would say permission to grieve, but also know that Jesus is the type of God that he say, "Hey, if you crying tonight, can I come cry with you? Because I'll begin to wipe those tears after a while." Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about just how, because we want to not just kind of hear this wisdom from you, but walk it out. And the way that you're shifting our paradigm and the way that we think, and even the way that we view our relationship with God through um, the work that you've created in disobedient God. Um, it can be a challenge to put the feet to it. So, what is your advice to practically make this a part of our daily lives, the way we make decisions, not just spiritual ones, but some of us have ideas about changing careers, ideas about we're dating someone, is this the one, to ideas about starting a family, ideas about getting our finances in order, and then we create this plan. And biblically speaking, we should surrender it to God and use that word sovereignty, which means that he has the final say. He gets to do what he wants to do, when he wants to do it, who he wants to do it with. All of that requires some effort on our part. So on a practical level, we are attempting to make daily, weekly, monthly, yearly decisions in our own life. How do we take this concept of understanding what a disobedient God looks like and use it in our decision making process?
Yeah. Yeah. I go back to what David said in Psalm, I believe it's 27 4 or 24/7. Um, he says, "One thing have I desired." And I think about that and I said, man, how did you get your heart down to one thing? Like one thing? He said, "One thing have I desired, and that will I seek after, that I may dwell in his temple," and watch this, and gaze upon his beauty and his glory. It's something about daily fixing your eyes on him and spending time with him that disciplines your reach for him, because you reach for what you're looking at, you reach for what you see. So, in a daily rhythm, what would it mean to have your desire for God lead your day, start your day, frame your day? Um, your gaze upon God shape your reach. In other words, I don't want to reach for a business plan that doesn't make God smile and that doesn't honor him in an amazing way. I don't want to build a company or start a new business that's not fueled by my gaze for him, because only what we do for Christ will last. So I want to build something eternal. So I want to put together a financial structure and a goal that that is directly shaped, informed by my gaze upon him, my gaze upon his word, his principles that he's laid out in scripture. When I'm looking for a spouse, I don't want to look at a spouse. I don't want to reach for my spouse gazing at her. I want to reach for my spouse gazing at him, because if she matches what I see in him, then I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good. But if I take my eyes off him and put my eyes on her and then try to bring her over, I didn't got the formula backwards. So the daily practice of living this out and working it out is a daily rhythm of spending time and putting your eyes on God. I'm going into a meeting here in a little bit, and it has the potential to be a little tense or a little, conflict, getting critical feedback and that kind of stuff. I'm going in this meeting not looking at the potential issues on the table, but with my gaze on God. And that's going to shape whether I reach for insecurity in the meeting, or do I reach for my Christ identity in the meeting? Do I reach for pettiness in the meeting, or do I reach for spiritual maturity and to walk in the fruit of God? You know what I mean? So that gaze, man, it begins to shape you in all your ways.
Man, so good, man. We got a link in the show notes for everybody to go get a copy of Albert's new book, Disobedient God. We talked about a few things, but can you give us a little more elaboration as to what people will find when they go and get a copy of this book?
Yeah, so the whole journey of how we respond. Some of us replace him, some of us run from him, some of us perform for him. And what I call you to do is confess to him, rest in him, and inevitably daily reach for him. So that'll be the journey we'll go on, and a lot of great stories, a lot of great encouragement, and especially for people who've been having a hard time, it will help you lift up your head. So pick it up. I really hope you enjoy it. We've gotten amazing feedback. People are being blessed. So I don't want you to be left out. Don't be left out. Get your blessing.
It's a fantastic book. I co-sign that for everybody that's listening and watching. What final words of encouragement would you give to the person that you had in mind when you were writing this book, and the person that's about to pick it up and about to read it? What would be the thing that you would want them to exit that final chapter with, as they conclude it?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things you do as a leader, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus Christ, one of the most important things, I would almost argue, it is the most important thing that you do. Um, and it might surprise you. Your most important thing to do is to stay encouraged. Listen, if you mess around and get discouraged, it ain't much you can do discouraged. Like, what can you do well discouraged? And discouragement opens up the door to all other urgements. So, as a final word, I'd encourage you. This book will help you stay encouraged. And I hope you invest in yourself and remember the most important thing you can do today, the most important thing you can do, don't you give up and stay encouraged.
Awesome. Pastor Albert, how can everybody keep up with you on the internet streets?
Albert Tate on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook. So it's my name, and then go to alberttate.com as well. We have a website if you want to reach out and connect and sign up for our email list. We send out emails every now and then just to keep you encouraged. So, yeah.
We'll have everything that Pastor Albert mentioned in the show notes of this episode. Thank you so much for taking time out of your super busy schedule to share your wisdom with us.
Man, I appreciate it. It's an honor to be on here. The His and Her Money Show. Let's get the money right. Yes.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode is in the books. And speaking of books, the name of the book is Disobedient God. This is something you need in your tool belt. Trust me, we're all on the same journey. We're all going to have this experience where we experience a disobedient God. And you want to have the strategies and the mentality that you need in order to persevere. That's all we got for this time, guys. It's been great. Until next time, peace.